Today we're going to discuss how to migrate and modernize your SQL infrastructure with Microsoft Azure. My name is Phil Balogh, Director of Sales with SNP Technologies. We are an Azure-focused systems integrator that helps our customers adopt and leverage the expanded features and native benefits that Azure and cloud computing provide. Today we're going to be covering the following topics: SQL Server 2008, 2008 R2 end of support, and what that means for everyone still running SQL 2008, 2008 R2 workloads on-premise. What are the options for migrating my database to a fully supported version of SQL with a focus on Azure? We'll discuss SNP's SQL Server migration journey engagement. We'll talk about the Migrate and Modernize roadmap. And we'll discuss licensing and cost considerations for your migration. Let's get started. As many of us may already be aware, extended support for SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 will end on July 9, 2019. Having said that, it's important to understand why we need to migrate or take action now. The first major concern is really focused around security. As of the end of extended support, Microsoft will no longer be providing access to critical security updates, which opens the potential for business interruptions and loss of data. As support ends, your organization may fail to meet compliance and regulatory standards. Maintaining legacy servers, firewalls, and intrusion systems can get expensive quickly. Additionally, purchasing extended support is incredibly cost prohibitive. 75% of the full SQL Server license costs annually with software assurance. There is an opportunity to innovate, to take advantage of new features and new built-in benefits by migrating to Azure. Security is a top priority for IT teams. New threats have made it harder than ever for IT to secure data and applications. A risk-based security report found that 4.2 billion records were stolen by hackers in 2016, which is a huge number and is only expected to grow. A Cisco annual cybersecurity report found that 1 in 5 organizations lose customers due to an attack, and nearly 30% lose revenue. I wouldn't want to be responsible for losing customers in my organization. A Juniper Research Cybercrime white paper estimates an $8 trillion cost of cybercrime to the global economy by 2022. That's a major impact and reinforces the need to make sure our data is secure at all times. At the end of extended support for SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2, your system may cease to be compliant with regulatory standards. Failure to be compliant could lead to business complications, penalties, and fines across several industries. Regulatory compliance standards may no longer be met at end of support, such as PCI, HIPAA, the Financial Services Modernization Act, and GDPR for companies who do business in the EU. Those statistics on security and compliance really drive home why it's important to seize the end of support as an opportunity to transform. 2 papers from Keystone Research have explored the operating impact of digital transformation and give you multiple reasons why your digital transformation should start today. Keystone finds that leading companies have outperformed competitors with higher revenue and operating margins. The research shows that digital transformation not only provides a challenge for managers, but also defines a major opportunity. Investment in digitizing your business appears to pay. Our empirical observations show that digitally transformed organizations performed much better than organizations that lagged behind. Over a 3-year period, average gross margin nearly doubled for the digital leaders versus laggards. Over that same 3-year period, average earnings before taxes showed nearly $40K more revenue generated per employee versus laggards. And over a 3-year period, average net income was 50% higher for the digital leaders versus laggards. End of support is like any life cycle milestone. It offers you a chance to reassess direction and set yourselves up for the future. Now that we've discussed why we should migrate our SQL 2008 and 2008 R2 workloads, it's important to understand what our options are. Again, we'll have an Azure-based focus to this. SQL Server on an Azure VM. Microsoft is offering 3 years of free critical security updates for migrating your SQL Server 2008, 2008 R2 workloads to SQL Server on an Azure VM. SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machines enables you to use full versions of SQL Server in the cloud without having to manage any on-premises hardware. SQL Server VMs also simplify licensing costs when you pay as you go. Azure Virtual Machines run in many different geographic regions around the world. They also offer a variety of machine sizes. The virtual machine image gallery allows you to create a SQL Server VM with the right version, edition, and operating system. This makes virtual machines a good option for many different SQL Server workloads. The next option we'll discuss is Azure SQL Managed Instance. Azure SQL Managed Instance provides near 100% compatibility with the latest SQL Server Enterprise Edition on-premises database engine, providing a native virtual network implementation that addresses common security concerns and a business model favorable for on-premises SQL Server customers. Managed Instance allows existing SQL Server customers to lift and shift their on-premises applications to the cloud with minimal application and database changes. At the same time, Managed Instance preserves all PaaS capabilities, automatic patching and version updates, automatic backups, high availability, that drastically reduce management overhead and TCO. Azure SQL Database Managed Instance is designed for customers looking to migrate a large number of apps from on-premises or IaaS, self-built, or ISV-provided environment to fully managed PaaS cloud environment with as little migration effort as possible. Using the fully automated data migration service in Azure, customers can lift and shift their on-premises SQL Server to a managed instance that offers compatibility with SQL Server on-premises and complete isolation of customers' instances within native VNet support. With software assurance, you can exchange their existing licenses for discounted rates on a SQL Database Managed Instance using the Azure Hybrid Use benefit for SQL Server. SQL Database Managed Instance is the best migration destination in the cloud for SQL Server instances that require high security and a rich programmability. Our next option is Azure SQL Database, Single Database or Elastic Pool. Single Database allows you to create and manage Azure SQL Database logical servers and single databases using the Azure Portal, PowerShell, Azure CLI, REST API, and T-SQL. Elastic Pool. SQL Database's Elastic Pools are a simple, cost-effective solution for managing and scaling multiple databases that have varying and unpredictable usage demands. The databases in an Elastic Pool are on a single Azure SQL Database server and share a set number of resources at a set price. Elastic Pools in Azure SQL Database enable SaaS developers to optimize the price performance for a group of databases within a prescribed budget while delivering performance elasticity for each database. Azure SQL Database enables you to dynamically add more resources to your database with minimal downtime. When demand for your app grows from a handful of devices and customers to millions, Azure SQL Database scales on the fly with minimal downtime. Scalability is one of the most important characteristics of PaaS that enables you to dynamically add more resources to your service when needed. Azure SQL Database enables you to easily change resources, CPU, power, memory, I/O throughput, and storage allocated to your databases. Now that we've taken a look at our options for migrating our SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 infrastructure to Azure, let's talk about some of the tools that will aid in the process. The first of those tools is called Azure Migrate. Azure Migrate helps you to assess whether your on-premise machines are suitable for running in Azure. Get size recommendations for Azure VMs based on the performance history of on-premise VMs, and get estimated costs for running on-premise machines in Azure. It also helps you visualize dependencies of on-premises machines to create groups of machines that you will assess and migrate together. The next tool is Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery lets you easily migrate your Windows Server 2008 machines, including the operating system, data, and applications on it, to Azure. All you need to do is perform a few basic setup steps, create storage accounts in your Azure subscription, and then get started with Azure Site Recovery by replicating servers to your storage accounts. Azure Site Recovery orchestrates the replication of data and lets you migrate replicating servers to Azure when you are ready. You can use Azure Site Recovery to migrate your servers running on VMware virtual machines, Hyper-V, or physical servers. And yes, Azure Site Recovery is compatible with the 32-bit version of SQL Server 2008. The next tool we'll discuss is the Azure Database Migration Service. Azure Database Migration Service integrates some of the functionality of our existing tools and services. It provides customers with a comprehensive, highly available solution. The service uses the Data Migration Assistant to generate assessment reports that provide recommendations to guide you through the changes required prior to performing a migration. It's up to you to perform any remediation required. When you're ready to begin the migration process, the Azure Database Migration Service performs all of the required steps. You can fire and forget your migration projects with peace of mind, knowing that the process takes advantage of best practices as determined by Microsoft. Based on the complexity of the migration, It's very possible or feasible that you could use one or all of these tools in conjunction to help you complete your migration. Now that we've discussed our migration options and some of the tools we'll use to assist with the process, let's talk about how SNP can assist you with your migration. Let SNP's data experts help you on your migration journey. Our technical resources have experience working with the migration tools and platform and can ease the pain and/or fear of migration based on our past experiences. SNP's SQL Server migration process is a 2-week engagement designed to rapidly assess your existing environment, design migration options and approaches tailored to your use cases, migrate, and provide support and training to your IT organization and/or end users. During the first week of engagement, SNP's data experts will work with your team to define current versus desired state, discuss the benefits of modernizing your SQL Server platform, and lay out the migration options and approaches. In week 2, our team will perform the migration, validate the database objects and data, and provide documentation, support, and training for your end users. As you can see, this is a streamlined approach to helping our customers migrate to a supported platform as quickly as possible and avoid any potential business interruptions and loss of data that could occur from a security breach. Please contact me at phil@snp.com to discuss engaging with SNP to assist in your SQL Server migration journey. My contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. As I've mentioned earlier in this presentation, End of support affords us an opportunity to take a look at where we are now in terms of our strategy for modernizing our infrastructure and applications. When you rehost your SQL Server 2008 or 2008 R2 infrastructure as virtual machines in Azure, you'll get free security updates for the next 3 years, which will provide the security and regulatory compliance assurance you need to maintain now. This also allows you the opportunity to start planning to re-architect, rebuild, or rewrite your applications with the goal of modernizing to take advantage of Platform as a Service features and offload much of the burdensome maintenance aspects of maintaining your applications on-premise. When you modernize and move your applications to Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, a fully PaaS-enabled service, you begin to see the most value in terms of PaaS features, such as automated patching and version updates, automated backups, and high availability. In addition, you have now become version-free, since Microsoft manages the platform. Both migration options to virtual machines in Azure or to Azure SQL Database, Managed Instance, Single Database, or Elastic Pool provide the flexibility, performance, hybrid connectivity, and security that will keep your data safe and your business compliant. In addition, it is possible to migrate to both virtual machines in Azure and Azure SQL Database Managed Instance with no code changes. One of the biggest benefits for modernizing your SQL Server 2008 R2 infrastructure is that you will never have to deal with another end of support transition. Let's take a look at the process for rehosting your SQL Server 2008 R2 infrastructure on virtual machines in Azure. Here we have an application represented by 2 application servers and 1 database server on premises. After assessing the application, it has been determined that the best fit for migration to Azure is by leveraging Azure Virtual Machines. In this case, our tool of choice will be to use Azure Site Recovery to replicate the servers and data to blob storage in Azure. Once we are ready to initiate the migration, we will perform a test failover, which will trigger the servers to be spun up in Azure. You now have the same on-premises servers and data created in Azure and can perform the appropriate testing activities. Once all testing has been conducted and functionality verified, you can plan your production cutover to Azure and make appropriate DNS changes to point to the Azure resources as your new production environment. Once your service has been migrated, it's important to take advantage of the vast options Azure offers to optimize and manage your environment. Azure provides easy-to-deploy solutions for backup and DR, infrastructure and security management, monitoring, and alerting. Now let's take a look at modernizing your infrastructure with Azure, or migrating to Azure SQL Database. Again, we have the same application represented by 2 application servers and 1 database server. This time, since we are not migrating to virtual machines, we will use Azure Site Recovery to replicate the application servers to blob storage in Azure and the database migration service and assistant to help us migrate our on-premise SQL Server 2008 R2 server to Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. The Database Migration Assistant will analyze the database and provide feedback on any issues that need to be remediated before migration. Once issues have been remediated, it is time to perform our test failovers and conduct appropriate testing on the new environment in Azure. Once testing is completed, you can plan your production cutover and make the appropriate DNS changes to point to the Azure environment. Since we are using Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, which is Platform as a Service, you get to reap all the benefits, such as automated patching and version updates, automated backups and high availability. Additionally, Azure provides easy-to-deploy solutions for infrastructure and security management, monitoring, and alerting. Customers with software assurance on their existing SQL Server 2008 R2 environment can take advantage of their Azure hybrid benefits to control costs as you migrate to Azure. This applies to both migration paths, Azure Virtual Machines and Azure SQL Database. It's also important to note that Microsoft provides a 180-day grace period for migration, during which you can use licensing both on-premise and in Azure. This provides a window for testing and planning your cutover. For those folks without software assurance, your Azure costs will include licensing for the resources you deploy in Azure. You can use tools in Azure to automate the uptime and downtime of these servers, thus controlling costs when machines are not in use. Now let's take a look at a case study to illustrate some of the points we've been discussing. Here we have a customer who was running a legacy SQL infrastructure that needed to be upgraded. At the same time, they needed to implement a solution that would provide for high availability and meet an SLA. This solution had to be compliant with Canadian privacy laws, which meant all data related to Canadian citizens and residents had to reside in a data center located in Canada. They were also hoping to reduce costs and provide enhanced security and features as a result. Working with SNP data specialists and cloud architects, they were able to implement a solution that brought them into compliance with Canadian privacy laws, provided enhanced security, and reduced their costs of maintaining outdated infrastructure. They were able to do this by migrating their on-premise SQL database that hosts Canadian user personal information to Azure in the Canadian region. They migrated the additional application databases to Azure SQL Database Elastic Pool in the US and published their .NET code to Azure App Services in the US. So when a request from a user comes in, the application code determines whether they're requesting a Canadian user or a user from another country and directs them to the appropriate database as a result. This demonstrates how an end-of-support migration to Azure can help meet both security and compliance concerns, as well as provide cost savings and a modernized platform to build on for the future. As we wrap up today's webinar, it's important to summarize what options are available to us for migration of our SQL Server 2008 R2 infrastructure, why it's important to take action now, and how SNP's SQL Server migration journey can assist you in your migration of your workloads. Thank you for viewing our webinar. For questions, more information, and assistance migrating your SQL Server workloads to Azure, please contact SNP Technologies at phil@snp.com.